Parshas SHMOS marks the transition from our avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the children, to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a transition from the Jewish family to the Jewish nation. And in fact, the book of Shemot begins, Ve'ele Shmos b'nei Yisrael, the Vav HaMachaber. In other words, the Chazal tell us, let's say like the fifth book of Moses, Eila Hadvarim, these are the words. So Eila Posel Es Harishonim. Dvarim is a new book, nothing to do, it's not a continuation of the four, in fact it's the summary, but Eila in general. Ve'ele Mosif Al Harishonim. It's a continuation from Sefer Bereshit. In fact, the Bahag calls Sefer SHMOS Sefer Hasheni, the second book. It's a continuation. It's the book of Golus V'Geula, the book of exile and redemption. And we finish up the exile, we reviewed, and we discussed the Geula. So we see that Moshe Rabbeinu was selected as the leader of the Jewish people. What's interesting to note is the Torah doesn't tell us why he was picked. So maybe we could find some clues if we go back to the beginning of the PARSHA, before the PARSHA of the Sneh, the burning bush, and see if there's any inklings to why Moshe Rabbeinu was picked. So if we look at the Torah, it says, Vayigdal HaYeled, Moshe Rabbeinu grows up. It says, Vayar b'sivlosam, he sees the burdens of the Jewish people. Again, Vayelach, and he sees Vayir, and he sees Ish Mitzri Makeh Ish Ivri Vayar Ki Ein Ish. The word Vayar, Moshe seems to be very, very powerful. Seems to be a key word here that seems to come up a lot. And we find it as well by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by the Sneh, I see the affliction of the Jewish people. So we see the word sing by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we see the word sing by Moshe. What is it coming to teach us? So Rashi already alludes to, it's close to Chazal. What do you mean he sees? It's not just seeing, but he made it, he felt the tsar, he was Nosiv Ol Chavero, he felt the tsar of the Jewish people. Even though he himself was comfortable, nevertheless, he was able to see the tsar. And that's what the common denominator. Hashem was looking for someone who shared his vision. A leader, not only someone who sees with his eyes, but sees with his heart as well. And in fact, Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz explains that we know Paro wanted to kill the Jews. So he said, Kol ben ha'yila tashichu, you take all the firstborn sons and throw them in the Nile River. So the question is, why do the boys? We all know Judaism depended on the mother. He should have got rid of the women. Why did he? That's a separate discussion. However, tradition has it that Shevet Levi was left out. So the question is, why does Paro care about Shevet Levi for? He's a cruel dictator, yet all of a sudden he cares about the tribe of Levi. So some say, yeah, even he had appreciation for the holy people. But Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz explains that no. He realized that the astrologers saw that the Moshiach Shel Yisrael, the leaders of the Jewish people, are going to come out from Shevet Levi. So he said, you know what? If Shevet Levi is brought up in the comfort, brought up in the hotel and the country club, they're not going to care about the slaves. And therefore I don't have to worry, the Jewish people will be slaves forever. However, he underestimated the power of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu had the ability, even though he himself was not in that situation, he transcended that, and he felt the pain of the Jewish people. In fact, that's why we find later on that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to be part of the mitzvah of the Arei Miklat, the city of refuge. So why did Moshe Rabbeinu want part of the city of refuge? So on one hand, this pashtus, Ohev mitzvahs, well, Yitzpah mitzvahs. One who loves mitzvahs can't get enough of them. You want to do more. However, on a deeper level, because Moshe Rabbeinu related to the city of refuge, because city of refuge is someone who, Gol Hadam, the avenger of blood, is coming after you, and the Arei Miklat is a safe refuge. You have a place to hide. He can't kill you in the city of refuge. Moshe Rabbeinu realized that when he was on his run after he killed the Mitzri, he realized he needed to there's nowhere to go, so he wanted to be part of the Mitzri. He felt the pain, he wanted to make sure the next person who's on the run has a place to go. So that's why he was involved in the Arei Miklat. So we see that Moshe Rabbeinu was Nosei Ba'ol Chaveiro, even transcended a normal individual, even when he was comfortable, he was able to. In fact, Rav Zera writes that one of the great things, Rav Zera was Zocha to Arichas Yamim. He was Zocha to long life. So the student asked Rav Zera, what did you do that you warranted long life? Arichas Yamim. So he gave him many things, but one of the things he gave is, I never rejoice in another person's suffering. So the question, okay, that's very nice. You shouldn't. You don't deserve a star for that. You did the right thing. Why should you deserve Arichas Yamim for that? So the commentator is going, no, that's not what it means. Of course, he did that. But he could, even when someone else was in Tsar, he could have enjoyed his own life. Of course, he wasn't going to enjoy the suffering of someone else, but he internalized the Tsar. He himself couldn't do it. So we see Moshe Rabbeinu saw the way God and HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw. He saw what society. He felt the pain, the empathy of the other people suffering. In fact, we see Moshe Rabbeinu was involved in 3 different events. We find Moshe get involved when the Egyptian is hitting the Jew. We find Jew versus Jew. We find later on 2 Gentiles, the people who didn't even know, strangers. So you say if he got involved in Jew versus, well, of course he knew he was Jewish. But then he even got involved in, 2 Jewish people were fighting. Of course, it's his people, but even 2 Gentiles. And therefore, because when he saw an injustice, he went ahead and he got involved. And in fact, the Medrash says, not only did he get involved in people, but there's a famous Medrash with the Gedi, the sheep, the goat, was running away, and he followed it, he went to get water, he realized how tired it was, and he carried the Gedi back. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, since you are a Roa Nema and you take care of that sheep, I'm going to put you in charge of my sheep, and that's Klal Yisrael. Moshe was the Roa Son, he was the shepherd of the Jewish people. And that was the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu. And in fact, we find that perhaps that was the name of Moshe, because Moses is the Egyptian name, and in fact in the beginning we find Yeled, Ben, Vayelech Ishmi, Beis Levi. We don't find the name isn't mentioned until Bas Paro names him. So he wasn't given a name until a couple of years later. He had many Jewish names, Avigdor, Tuvia. So I understand when he was in the royal palace, he went by the name Moshe. But after the fact, when he was no longer there, why did he go by Moshe? Why by the Sneh? So the Selevan points out that was the yesod of the name, that Moshe, as opposed to Moshe in a passive form, but Moshe is in the active, because I drew you out of the water, because I saved you, that's going to be your essence, your name, you're going to go and save other people. And that was the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's like Bas Paro was Moser Nefesh. And she knew the decree, and she went ahead and saved Paro, and he called his name Moshe, and God called Moshe, Moshe, you were saved for a reason, not just to be a Kohen Midjan, not to be a Roa Son in the Midjan, but to lead the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. And that's what your name represents. And we see, besides Moshe Rabbeinu seeing and feeling, there's a third thing that always happened afterwards. It's one thing to see and feel, but it always was followed by action. It wasn't enough to... Many people would see and feel it, okay, and they move on and they go on with their lives. Moshe Rabbeinu felt the pain and did something about it. And in fact, that's what we find by other Jewish leaders as well. By David HaMelech, we have a famous pasuk at the end of Benji, Nara Isi, Gam Zakanti, V'lo Isi Sadig Nezab. I was young and I was old and never saw a tzaddik forsaken. The question is, what do you mean you never saw a tzaddik forsaken? You have to get out more. It happens all the time. Tzaddik v'ralo, Rasha v'tovo, so what does he mean? So some commentators point out, no, of course, David saw tzaddik forsaken. He says, Nara Yisi, the biblical seeing. I never saw someone forsaken and I didn't do something about it. I went ahead and helped, and that's what we find by Esther as well. Ra'ol Ra'isi, when she went to the palace to tell Achashverosh, how can I stand by while my Jewish people are suffering? In fact, there's a famous story. They say over, I think, Rabbi Amital, who was one of the Rosh Yeshiva with Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein in Gush, and I think he passed away. But he used to, with his Talmidim, used to ask him, like what, or people used to ask him, what does your yeshiva stand for? Like, what does it represent? He always used to give the following story. Some say it was the Baal Tanya, but there was the Baal Tanya, let's say, learning in one room all the way to the right, his son learning in the room in the middle, and all the way on the left was his grandson, a little baby. So they're learning in the night, and all of a sudden the baby started crying. He figured the father would take care of it. It's going on and on, so the grandfather got up and he took care of the baby. On the way back in, he said to his son, like, what's going on here? Didn't you hear the baby crying? Like, why didn't you take care of your baby? So the son said, well, I'm sorry, I guess I was so immersed in my Torah, I didn't hear the baby cry. And the Baal Tanya said back to him, if someone learns and doesn't hear the cry of a baby, someone learns and doesn't hear the cry of the Jewish people, there is something wrong with your learning. And that's the yesod of Jewish leadership. You can't just stand alone in a vacuum. It has to be vayar. It has to be seeing, feeling, and action. And that's what we see from our Jewish leaders. From Moshe to from Moshe to David to Esther, we learn this yesod, and that's something yesod not only for the leaders, but for all of us, that we have to feel the desire of others, and that's not enough to see it. We need the biblical seeing. We have to get up and do something about it as well. Shabbos, we're going to begin to read from Sefer SHMOS, the book of Exodus. We know there are 5 books of Moses, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, Bereshis, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim, and Chazal give us different names. They tell us the essence of the Sefer. So Bereshis is known as Sefer HaYetzirah, the book of creation for obvious reasons, and as well the Netziv says it's known as Sefer HaYashar, the book of the Yashar, the straight people, in other words, the mentioned as the Avos. We'll come back to Shmos in a minute. Vayikra is known as the book of Torah's Kohanim, the laws that are Kohanim. Bamidbar is known as Numbers, the census. And Devarim is known as Mishnah Torah. It's a summary of the Torah. That's why, interesting, that's why the Rambam called the Sefer the Mishnah Torah, because he said, all you needed are 24 books of Tanakh and my Sefer. That's the Torah Shebeksav, this is the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So even though many don't like that, so they call it the Yad. It's the 14 volumes instead of calling it the Mishnah Torah. But nevertheless, the real Mishnah Torah is the book of Sefer Devarim. It's a summary. So what about the book of Shmos? So that's known as the book of Sefer Golus V'Geula, the book of exile and redemption, for obvious reasons. The book begins, the Eilu Shmos B'nai Yisrael Haba Mitzrayma. It's a continuation. It begins with the Jews being slaves in Egypt, Vayakam El Chadash, etc. And then it ends when the Jews leaving Mitzrayim and receiving the Torah in Har Sinai and getting the Mishkan. So hence the book of Golus V'Geula. It's interesting that the Bahag, one of the Rishonim, when he gives names to the different Svarim, but when he refers to Shmos, he calls it Sefer Sheni. He just calls it the second book. So the Netziv, that's what, he couldn't come up with a name. Like, why can't he say what it is? Why is he calling it the second book? So the Netziv explains it's because the Bahag is getting at it, that it's a continuation from Sefer Bereshis. It's not like a new book, so to speak. It's not a separate name. It's a continuation from the story where we ended off at the end of PARSHA's Vayechi. That's what the beginning of SHMOS gives a little summary. Who came down to Mitzrayim, and then we get into the exile. So since it's a continuation, it's not its own book. So therefore, the Bahag didn't want to give it its independent name, implying like it's totally independent. And along those lines, Rav Nissen Alpert, one of my Rebbeim at Yeshiva University, a Talmud Muvak of Rav Moshe Feinstein on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, he says Pshat. What do you mean Geula? Geula is similar to the word of Hagala. What's Hagala? Hagala is a term in kashrus. When something has to be koshered, let's say if something became non-kosher, there's different ways of koshering things. There's one way called liban. Liban is when you have the big blowtorch and you burn it out, or you put it in a self-cleaning oven. According to most, it gets hot enough, it burns it out. It's soref is a isser. But Hagala, it's pole, kabola kakpoto, that you boil it out and you throw and you boil and you get the treif which is inside and you get rid of it. So Hagala is similar to Geula, except Hagala is the bad, meaning Hagala is taking out the bad and now left with good. So he says Hagala, Geula, that's what the whole purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim was. That was basically to bring out our potential. That Chazal tell us it was the Kor HaBarzel. It was like the fiery iron. It wasn't just, besides maybe the onish aspect of the punishment aspect of what happened with Mechiras Yosef, but it was a cleansing process. They had to go through a certain purging in order to come out. So Hagala, Geula, is they realized their potential in Mitzrayim. They're all full of potential, and they took the potential from inside and they made it Bepola and they actualized it, and that led to the Geula. So that's Geula and Hagala. That's what Rabbi would explain a similar concept that by kashrus it's taking out the treif and making it kosher. By Yetzias Mitzrayim, we are talking about that they actually took out the potential, everything they learned in Egypt, and they took out all the good things, and it led to the Geula. So the Torah praises the midwives. We all know, we're familiar with the Gzeira of Paro, that all male children, if you look in the Pasuk, it says, Kol ha-ben hay. It doesn't say anything about a Jew, but it's a Targum writes Jew, because everyone knew what Paro meant. You know, you have to read in between the lines. Everyone knew it meant a Jewish male. But the midwives feared God, Hashem, more than they feared Paro, and they didn't kill the babies. The whole story of Moshe ended up, they put them into the Nile River, etc. So it says, Vayaschachem batim, so they were rewarded. So what do you mean they were built? They got real estate in Egypt? I don't know how it's doing today. Like, I don't know, after the Morsi government on, is real estate up, down? I don't know I'm not sure about the Egypt. So what does it mean they got houses? So Rashi tells us from Chazal, Bate Kohuna V'Leviya. It doesn't mean real estate as in land and houses, but they were Zocha to the Yichus, because it says, because really, when Paro said all the male children should be killed, so what was he trying to accomplish? Like we all know that a Jew's determined by the mother, not by the father. So even if the Jewish women intermarried and married Egyptian men, the kids are still going to be Jewish. So what was So what did Paro have in mind? So we'll see the different explanations, but they point out that it was Mida Keneged Mida. In other words, so what was all Paro going to accomplish? He wasn't going to destroy the Jews because the women are going to still live and they're going to have babies and they'll be Jewish. That's a separate machlokas. It could be Paro didn't realize that because there's a famous machlokas, the Ramban and the Bali Tosis in PARSHA's Emor by the Makalel. Exactly, we all know that by a Yid it goes by the mother. However, by a non-Jew it goes by the father. So in other words, if you have a Syrian marrying an Egyptian, is the kid a Syrian or an Egyptian? So it goes by the father. So it could have been Paro didn't realize, he thought it goes by the father, and therefore he got rid of that. But that was a separate machlokas, Kodem Matan Torah, whether for a Jew, we all know for a Jew after Matan Torah it goes by the mother. But the discussion in the Rishonim, maybe Kodem Matan Torah did go by the father, and therefore if it went by the father, so then Paro would have been right. He destroyed all the male children and then he wouldn't have any Jews. But either way, whatever his kavanah was, he wasn't successful. We're still here today. And therefore they didn't listen to him, and they were rewarded with that Aaron became, the Kahuna, Moshe, Levi, etc., and the Malchus they got from David, etc. So the Brisker Rav points out that Chazal always reward, or they always punish, or God always rewards. The punish is Mida Keneged Mida. It's always sometimes it's hard to figure out how it's Mida Keneged Mida, but corresponds to your action you did. So the question is, where's the Mida Keneged Mida here? The Mida Keneged Mida here is that since Paro, what was he hoping to accomplish by getting rid of the males? That there wouldn't be any more yichas. It's true the Jew goes for mommy, but if you're a Kohen, if you're a Levi, if you're a Malchus Beis David, you need a father. If you have a Gentile father, you're not going to have any of the yichas. So therefore, it's Mida Keneged Mida. Paro tried to destroy the yichas, so what was the reward for the midwives? Mida Keneged Mida, they got the Bate Kahuna, Leviya, and Malchus. In fact, that's the famous Brisker Rav as well, that Chazal tell us in the Gemara in Sota that Paro had 3 advisors to advise him what to do with the Jewish problem. So it was Bilam, Yisro, and Eov. So Bilam said, kill the Jews. Yisro didn't want to have anything to do with it. He said, I'm not being part of this barbaric nation. I am out of here. And he ran away. And he gave up a prominent position and he ran away. Eov took the middle ground. He didn't say a word. He probably felt strongly, but he was afraid to speak up. He didn't speak up. So Chazal tell us they're all rewarded or punished Mida Keneged Mida. Bilam got punished. We know it says in the Torah that Bilam ben Beor hargu b'charev. Bilam ben Beor was killed by the sword. He wanted to kill the Jews. Mida Keneged Mida, he was killed in battle. Yisro gave up a prominent position in Egypt, so he became Kohen Minyan. His descendants as well became under Sanhedrin. So it was Mida Keneged Mida. But Eov, but Eov's hard to understand. Eov kept quiet, and we all know Job. He lived a life of suffering. So the Brisker Rav asks, what is the connection? What is keeping quiet? Bishrom, Bilam, I understand. Mida Keneged Mida, you wanted the Jews dead, you got killed. Yisro gave up a prominent position, but where's the Mida Keneged Mida by Eov? So he doesn't give this example, the Brisker Rav, but I will. That, either you're in your house, maybe you've been in camp. That's what usually happens. Other places, where someone's taking a shower or something, so you turn on the hot water, cold water or something, and all of a sudden, the pipes either, let's assume that they become burning hot, and it starts burning, and the guy jumps, and he jumps out. He starts screaming, and he jumps out of the shower, and everyone's laughing. That Odre. So I'm being descriptive. I'm not condoning those actions, of course. So, nor am I condemning them at the moment either. I'm just discussing them. So, the Gemara tells us. So what does he do? He jumps out. So let me ask you something. Did the fact that he screamed, did that take away the scars on his back from the burning water? It was Yad Soledis Bo, or maybe Yad Nichvas Bo, it was very hot. The answer is no. It didn't change the scars. So you ask, why is he screaming? So they say it in Yiddish. I don't know Yiddish. I'll say it in English. So the Brisker Rav says it in Yiddish. That he says, because when you're in pain, you scream. If it hurts, you scream. It doesn't matter. It's not that the screaming is going to make you better. It's a natural human reaction. If you're in pain, you call out Sa'aka Gadola, you scream. So that's what Brisker Rav says. It was Midah Keneged Midah. That you sat there around silently, not doing anything. You were sitting around, he was discussing the destruction of the Jewish people, and you didn't make a macha, you didn't make a public protest against it. Therefore, you didn't feel the pain of others, the Jewish people. Okay, if you don't feel the pain, Midah Keneged Midah, you're going to give a life of sorrow. That was the Eov. So we see throughout the PARSHA SHMOS, we find the concept of Midah Keneged Midah. We find it over here by Bilam, Yisro, and Eov, and as well we find it by Yasra and Batim. We see that the Jewish people were rewarded, and that's what the Sefer SHMOS is known as Sefer Golus, the Geula, the book of exile and redemption. And as Rav Alper explained, Gula from the Lashon Hagala, the purging, that we purged the trephis out of the pot. The Jewish people got purged in Egypt in a positive way. I mean, it was negative also. I'm not condoning the Egyptians. But the Jews were able to realize the potential, and therefore Geula equal Hagala, and it led to the Golus Mitzrayim, eventually led to the Geula Mitzrayim, led by Moshe Rabbeinu. All of the Avodah Zarah, that both were idol worshippers. So how come you're punishing the Egyptians and not the Jews? So the Medrash says, because I know that the Egyptians are doing it by choice, they're working, no one's forcing them, but the Jews under the terrible situation of suffering and shibud, so that's why they're doing it. That's what Yed Elokim, I know if they weren't under this situation, only God could give that testimony, they wouldn't to worship Avodah Zarah, and therefore I'm not going to punish them. So based on this, there's a famous Beis Halevi, the Beis Halevi from the Soloveitchik family. He wants to tie it into a halacha l'maisa question, that he raises the question in terms of Shabbos emergencies, that even though all things are never equal, but assuming all things are equal, so he discusses the question: if you have two doctors you use, you're part of a plan, and you have a Shomer Shabbos doctor and a non-Shomer Shabbos doctor. So again, you always go with the better doctor, the one you're comfortable with. That's not for discussion. But assuming hypothetically it's even, and you want to call one, or which one should you use? So the Beis Halevi says you should use the Shomer Shabbos doctor. Why should you use the Shomer Shabbos doctor? So the Beis Halevi says, based on the following lumdis, he says, what is the definition? He has a very strong definition of what is an onus. What's considered doing? But we know if you do something under duress, you're exempt. Onus Rachmana Patre. So not only do we pass them v'chai b'hem that you're allowed to, there's a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to desecrate the Shabbos, which you're not really desecrating, in order to save someone's life. Not only to save someone's life, even if you're not even sure. A safek pikuach nefesh, it goes on perception. If in your mind this is a life and death situation, a sakana, so therefore you do. In fact, there was recently when there was the big snow in Israel, the 12 inches last week, I think there was a article somewhere someone was telling me about. He didn't remember which rabbis, but there's a discussion in Israel among different whether you could. I think the issue was turning on the heat or something, because you had little kids in the house. I guess there was no, I guess in Israel it's harder to find Goyim, not that they're not there. But the bottom line was, I guess it was the middle of the night, it was called, I forgot the exact issue, was turning on I think the breaker broke, and you had to put back the breaker or something, whatever it is. So the issue was, so you had a machlokas among two rabbis. One rabbi did it, and the next other rabbi said, what are you talking about? You're not allowed to do it. So I said, it's not a machlokas. I said, they're both right. I said, it's all about perception. The rabbi who said yes, he felt it was a sakana. He had younger kids, it could have been cold in his house, and whatever the case was, it was a suffix sakana. So he did it. The person who said no, so he felt it wasn't. If you don't feel it's a sakana, you can't do it. If you feel it's a sakana, you can do it. So it could be an issue of perception. So the Beis HaLevi writes that an honest is someone only if I'm a machal Shabbos in general. So now there's a Shabbos emergency. To the fact that so let me point. Even the Beis HaLevi would have to agree. Let's say you're sitting at home and you're not being machal Shabbos now. If you went out for a Shabbos emergency, you'd have to agree that it's hard to say you're a machal Shabbos in that scenario. But let's say you're out anyway. You're driving around. You're heading to the beach. You're heading to the movies, you're heading to the game, and all of a sudden on your beeper you get an emergency, they need you in the hospital, or you see someone in front of you, just got it. So in that situation, are you labeled an honest or not? So the Beis HaLevi says no. The Beis HaLevi says that if someone, the only time you machal Shabbos of emergency, then you're an honest. If you're going to machal Shabbos anyway, and the emergency is coincidental, then he says, it's better to call the Shomer Shabbos doctor, because even though it might not be, it's still different than someone just being Machal Shabbos randomly, but he claims that the definition of an honest is someone who would only do it for the situation, even though the situation came up, you're not labeled a total honest. I'm not saying it's the same, and in fact, the Rav Elchanan Wasserman has a similar yesod. He doesn't give this example, but I will. So let's say a person goes, some people go to Babi Bessie's for lunch every day. They have the Babi Bessie's special.
Well, shalom.
Others go to the McDonald's special. I don't know, they still have that 99 cents, or who knows, $2.99 anymore, but whatever the lunch special is at McDonald's, you guys will fill me in later, so whatever it is. So, and you go every afternoon, you go for lunch, and that's what you do. So one day you're walking over to McDonald's, you're about to walk in the door, some guy comes with a mask on and puts a gun to you and says, I know you're Jewish, I know you have to eat kosher, I'm going to make you eat treif today. So you go up to the counter, and you say the usual, and they put it up, and you sit down, and you eat the sandwich with the gun pointing at you. So that's the case of ones and ratzon bahadi hadadi. What's the situation when I do it anyway, but it happens to be in this situation I'm an honest. So that's what Rav Elchanan writes in a different context. When someone is ones and ratzon bahadi hadadi, you're not labeled an honest, and therefore there is a level of responsibility as well. And along those lines, there's a famous hafla. Hafla is a sefer they use in the yeshivas on Ksuvas and other Masechtas, so that he points out the following. There's a Gemara in Yevamos which says, well, there's a pasuk in the Chumash which says, Pru Ravu, you have a mitzvah of having children, having the minimum speaking, a male and a female, a boy and a girl. Obviously it's out of your control, but your mitzvah is to try to have kids. And so the Gemara talks about, let's say you're married to a woman and you can't have children, so the obligation of Pru Ravu, ironically, is on the man, not the woman, for many reasons. But the strict reason, because the pasuk says Pru Ravu v'kivshuha, it's a darko of a man to be the kovesh the mechama, not the woman. And the Meshech Chochmah gives different philosophical reasons why, but that's not our issue now. So the mitzvah is on the man. So, and then the reason why it's had to be on a man, because it was on a woman, she'd be forced to divorce her. Because a woman can't have many husbands. So the halacha is, if you're married to a woman for 10 years, you can't have kids. So the Gemara says you have to find another wife because you have a mitzvah approved. You don't have to divorce your wife. Today you would, but biblically speaking, you could have more than one wife. So the question, so then the Gemara says that's only true if you live in Chutz La'aretz. Or that's only true. That's only true if you live in Eretz Yisrael. But if you live in Chutz La'aretz, you could say it's the Avon Chutz La'aretz that's causing it. That's the case by Avram. If you're living in Israel and you can't have kids, then you have to find another wife. But if you're living in Chutz La'aretz, it's because the sin of living in Chutz La'aretz is causing you, and you have to move to Eretz Yisrael. It's something you don't have to get another wife. So that's the Gemara. So it comes along, the Haflan says, we know, we're familiar with the Gemara in the end of Ksubis, which talks about the milas of living in Eretz Yisrael. Kol Mailin, it says each spouse could force the other spouse to live in Eretz Yisrael, and whoever doesn't want to go is responsible for paying the ksuva, etc. So Tosfos over there writes, however, Bizman Hazeh, meaning during his day, during the day of Tosfos, he says, Bizman Hazeh, there is no longer a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. Whether that applies today, that's a further discussion, but in the time of Tosfos, there was no mitzvah. Why not? So either because of Sakanas Drachim, the dangers of getting there, or the difficulty of fulfilling the mitzvahs hatuyas ba'aretz, the difficulties of fulfilling Truma Ma'aser. Avnei Nezer, who lived 100 years ago, claims those reasons don't apply anymore. But either way, Tosfos writes, Bizman Hazeh, there is no mitzvah. So it comes along the Hafla and says, if that's the case, then if Bizman Hazeh, there is no mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, if there is no mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, then there is no Avera to live in Chutz La'aretz. So you can't say Avon Chutz La'aretz is responsible for anything. So he says, Bizman Hazeh, even if you're living in Chutz La'aretz, if you live with your wife for 10 years and you can't have children, so you have to find, and we don't pass it that way, but that's the Gemara. So that's this kasha. So Bizman Hazeh, that there's no mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, according to Tosfos, even in Chutz La'aretz you should have to divorce your wife or find another wife. So comes along the Hafla and says, no, who are we kidding? We all know, even if there was a mitzvah to live, even if we had our own Jewish state, even if it was easier to live in Eretz, we wouldn't move anyway. So therefore, the fact that there is no mitzvah doesn't make a difference. You wouldn't go anyway, so therefore it's Avon Chutz La'aretz anyway, because you're responsible, because even if there was a mitzvah, you weren't going to do it anyway. So the same. So what's he saying? If you're Ratzon and own it at the same time, you're still responsible. So that's the yisod of the Hafla, the Ravachan and Wasim, and the Beis HaLevi. They're very strict. That the mere factor in onus doesn't have to excuse you. If you're Ratzon also, they have to be a pure onus to be excused. But if you're Ratzon and onus Bahadi Adadi, you need a level of atonement, you're still responsible. And one more example, the Rinas Yitzchak says, Yosef lived to 110. The Medrash says he should have lived to 120. Why 120? It's a good question. But the Medrash assumes that he's supposed to live to 120, and he lost 10 years of his life. Why did he lose 10 years of his life? So the Medrash says because when he was speaking with his brothers, and they called the father Avdecha Yaakov, by serving Yaakov, he didn't make a macha. He didn't protest when they were talking in front of him and said, you're serving Yaakov. So therefore he lost 10 years. For each time he lost a year of his life. That's the Medrash. So the Rinas Yitzchak is like, what are you talking about? It only says it's 5 times in the Torah. So therefore he should only lose 5 years of his life. So where's the 10 times? So it says 5 times in he said it, but so basically there are 5 times he said it in Hebrew, but there are 5 times when there was an interpreter in the room, because Yosef didn't want them to know that he understood Hebrew. So therefore, he said he should only be responsible for the 5 times, because he couldn't respond when he said it in Hebrew. So the reason said, yeah, but so what? But the fact he didn't make a macha after the interpretation, to not only be responsible for the 5 times he didn't, but he's onus and ratzon b'hadeh. We see he didn't do the right thing. So either way, that's the yesod of the Beis HaLevi, that he says, if you have a choice, all things being equal, 2 qualified doctors, you go with the Shomer Shabbos doctor, because really, if the non-Shomer is just coming, if he's going to be Machal Shabbos anyway, perhaps he's not considered an honest. That's the Beis HaLevi. Comes along the Tzitz Eliezer, I'll have to say Zatzal now, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, who passed away. He's the chief rabbi of, not chief rabbi, he was the rabbi of Shaarei Tzedek, the big hospital in Eretz Yisrael. He was the big posek who entered all the shilas. He was very big into medical ethics. He has many volumes. Rav Asher Weiss, I believe, took over. There's another big Rav, he took over, I believe. But the Tzitz Eliezer writes, he quotes the Beis HaLevi, but it's unclear if he's quoting him what? A bit miyah, like, what's he talking about? That's a big chiddush in the Beis HaLevi. And he says he agrees with the Beis Halevi, but for a totally different reason. He says I say to call a Shomer Shabbos doctor also. Why? Because let's say in emergencies they're equal. I don't go with the Beis Halevi's chiddush. Shabbos emergency is a Shabbos emergency. V'chai bahem, in fact you have a mitzvah to go ahead. In fact you don't want it to be like the person's hesitating, should it go or not? So he says, but so why do I say call the Shomer Shabbos doctor? For pragmatic reasons. We all know the Yiddish Shemama. They call the doctor, they're in panic mode, and when the doctor gets no big deal, it's nothing, it's a virus. So if it's a Shomer Shabbos, he knows all the rules. Okay, so whatever, don't worry about it. I'll write you up a prescription later, or I'll know what turn on lights, what to do, what not to do. But a non-shomer, he's going to end up being Machal Shabbos for things that really you're not allowed to, because it's not really. Once you find that it's not an emergency, so then there's only a limited amount of things you can or can't do. So he's just saying, from a pragmatic point of view, you should call the Shomer Shabbos doctor because he's going to know the do's and don'ts of Shabbos non-emergencies, or what's considered the go, what's considered a no-go. So that's the sit. So you have the Beis Halevi and the Tzitz Eliezer both saying, call the Shomer Shabbos doctor. So when I was thinking about the Shaila before I knew the Beis Halevi and the Tzitz Eliezer, I thought you should call the non-Shomer Shabbos doctor. And then later I found that I was in good company. I don't know if they think they're in good company, but I think I'm in good company. I found that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, I should say I agree with them, that they agree with me. But so what they agree that you should call the non-Shomer Shabbos doctor. Why call the non-Shomer Shabbos doctor? So the reason I thought of, and that was that Svar as well, is because there's 24, 25 hours in a Shabbos, basically. So let's say someone who's Shomer Shabbos, so in theory he's doing mitzvahs all the time, sleeping, eating cholent, learning, whatever you're doing, davening. So you're spending Shabbos with your family. You're doing mitzvahs all day. The non-Shomer Shabbos, he's watching the games, he's being Machal Shabbos. So if you give him a Shabbos emergency, at least for 1 hour, 5 hours, keep him busy on Shabbos. So at least he's only Machal Shabbos 20 hours this Shabbos, or 15. You might as well get him involved in the mitzvah, because the other person's doing mitzvahs anyway. So therefore that's why Rabbi Yaakov writes in Rabbi Moshe that better to call the non-Shomer Shabbos doctor, because he's not in, we don't know, he could be involved in Aveiros or Chilul Shabbos, at least get him involved in mitzvahs. So you have a Machlokas HaPoskim. On one hand you have the Tzitz Eliezer, the Beis Halevi, or Rabbi Chanan, you have the Rosh Yeshiva go and Lumdis, they go with the Beis Halevi. The Tzitz Eliezer goes pragmatically. You go with the Shomer Shabbos, and Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Moshe say you go with the non-Shomer. In fact, you have a similar machlokas, it seems, between Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach regarding a similar question. Let's say you're medical school, and most medical schools you can't choose. You get stuck with Shomer Shabbos residency or non-Shomer. So let's say you get put on a Shabbos, and you have a friend who's Jewish, but he's not observant. Are you allowed to switch with that person who's not going to keep Shabbos anyway? The Rosh Shlomo Zalman says no. He says with Meir. Moshe says it's not a problem. You can switch with the non-Shomer Shabbos doctor. And it's a similar shaila with the Israeli soldiers who have to go on the Temple Mount. Let's say you have a religious soldier who doesn't want to go up, and that's the Rosh Shlomo Zalman would say no. We have to get into this question with Meir. It just gets into inviting non-observant people over for Shabbos as well.